Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Michael K. And he is a coach, he's an entrepreneur, he helps individuals with career transitions, and he does that in different facets. I'm really happy to have him on the show. And I think it's going to be a great addition to the audience looking to transition, whether it's abruptly or gradually. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here, and this is such an area of difficulty for so many successful people to think about their next step. It's filled with lots of landmines, but it's definitely doable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. We'll talk about why that is, and especially for high income and the extremely intelligent, very educated individuals that the audience is. But briefly talk about who you are, how you got there, and how the audience can benefit from what you have to give to them today.
Okay, I'll try and give you the brief and not too convoluted biography. I actually started my professional career as an accountant. I spent 10 years in public accounting and then decided I got really tired of looking backwards. Everything was based on history. And so a good friend of mine said, "Why don't you come and work with me?" And he owned a financial services firm. I didn't know anything about insurance or investments or things like that. It was just all, but it seemed like this was forward thinking. Like, what do people care about? Their futures, their values, the things that make them that they look forward to. So looking forward was really enticing for me. And I went into that business with him. I found out really quickly how that it was really based on selling stuff. The exchange of, if you buy this insurance or investment product from me, I'll do all this planning for you. And I wound up transitioning out of that model into creating my own firm, which eventually led to my financial life planning practice that I called Financial Life Focus, which was really based on the tenets of financial life planning, which is really all based on, what do you care about most? How do you put your head on the pillow at night and know that you're moving forward, and doing this without having to sell anything, charging a fee that covered everything that a client would like. And that was super satisfying. And about, well, 2.5 years ago, I handed the keys to my partner, who's a young planner. His name is Jeremy Levin, who is brilliant and accomplished. And he was actually a student of mine while I was teaching at NYU. And he wound up coming on board with me and totally bought into uh, our methodology of planning and how we can help people. And so I'd left a firm that had advisors in Boston and New York and California and Florida, and Jeremy is actually in Philadelphia. So that was my background. And 2.5 years ago, well, actually 3.5 years ago, I started studying to become a certified life coach. And I figured I could continue my work helping people without having to talk about money, which I did for decades and decades. And I wrote 2 books about it. One for financial planners called The Business of Life, and the other was called The Feel Rich Project, which I wrote for consumers, and wrote dozens and dozens and I shouldn't say that, hundreds and hundreds of articles that I wrote for Forbes and other media outlets about planning and about uh, focusing yourself on your decisions on your values. In transition, I created a community that was aimed at successful, especially men who have the most difficulty in transitioning to life after career, that I call Chapter X. And the idea is to define, who are you when you're no longer your job, when you're no longer your title. And we spend decades and decades and decades becoming masters at what we do, whether we're physicians, whether we're attorneys, accountants, whatever it is. And we have reached the stage of mastery. And when we retire, we go from mastery to novice in one day, because we're all novices at retirement. So that's been my journey. And right now, I've created this community. I actually do a biweekly podcast called Chapter X, and I write 3 or 4 blog pieces a week, and I don't talk about money, uh, but I do talk about the transition. And I've recently embarked on doing more speaking and keynotes and workshops for audiences who are want to know, how do I get there? How do I start thinking about these things? So that's kind of what I'm doing. I guess the only thing that I left out of major concern is after a 50-year hiatus, I went back to playing trumpet. I was a pretty accomplished trumpet player in my youth and put it in the case for 50 years, and it took me 50 years to reopen it.
Yeah, it's a really great introduction. And what's interesting is, a lot of parallels. I went into medicine to, we all come and we want to help people, but then we realize, we're just cogs in the machine and we're just kind of working for insurance companies and all these bureaucrats. And so one question I have is, why do some of the most smartest, intelligent, educated, hardworking, high income struggle with transitions? And why is it men in particular? Is there something just cultural, or talk about that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is because we are trained to be aimed towards success, to be aimed towards top of the hill, where this is what we aim all our, we're from our very young age, our parents are, you want to get a good job, you want to become this, you want to become that, you want financial security, you want to achieve. So that becomes us, right? We become it, we become that journey. And the problem is that along the way, we lose the idea of finding another side of us. What else can bring us joy? What else can be interesting? What else can we do that is not based on having to be great at it? So you've got to kind of disassemble decades of training and focus to thinking something differently. So it's really challenging for successful people to think other than the way that they've been trained all these years.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of because basically it's almost like you have to relearn. Yeah, I mean it's hard to describe it this way, but it's almost kind of like you have to kind of go back to square one and kind of do all the things that made you successful in a different area, and knowing that you're not, you have to earn your stripes again. It kind of reminds me of like an athlete, or that gets injured and that's got to go to rehab, or athlete that suffers a career-ending injury and they have to reinvent themselves some other way. The next question is, so what sort of like mindsets help these individuals with these transitions? Like, what are some of the most common sorts of negative thinking, like or and how can you reframe those perceptions?
Well, I think the first step is to go back and think about all the transitions you've experienced in your lifetime. And I think it's fair to say that every one of those transitions were uncomfortable. Okay. In the crucible of change, there is no comfort. There is just this feeling of, oh my God, like this is creating anxiety because I've got to navigate. I need new information. I need a new mindset. I need new habits. I need what are the tools that I need to go to this next step? So what I say to people when I coach them or in my talk is the idea of, you've gone through transitions before. Let's recognize them, and you've navigated them successfully. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be in the position you are today if you weren't successful at it. So let's understand that it's just another transition. This one comes with an extra kind of boatload of issues because of identity. We identify ourselves by our career. I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a executive, I'm a this, I'm a that. And and when you're in your next chapter post career, you're none of those things. You're you. So I asked the question, who were you before you were your job? Were you um, interested in things? Were you curious? Were you adventuresome? Were you willing to explore and try new things? And then the idea of saying, can you do something without the expectation that you're going to be good at it? But it might just be ready for for it, fun. It might be fun. It might be interesting. It might be purposeful. And, I got an email from one of the members of the community today, and he was reading the New York Times article that just came out yesterday about different people weighing in on their retirement. And a lot of it was about joy. What's joyful? What's fun? What's interesting? What's different? Instead of this idea of I must be seen as this. So a lot of it is ego driven. So, what do we get at work? We get our ego strokes, we have socialization, we have things that we find meaningful and purposeful, and we have routine. Right now, the next day, when one retires, and I really don't like the word retirement. Richard Eisenberg, writer for so many great outlets, he calls it unretirement. The idea of what can I try? And if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, and it's such a great point because what's interesting is because I'm spending the summer here in Europe, and like it's really a cultural shift because in the West we're defined by how much we make or what we do as a living, and here when you introduce yourself, nobody asks you what your occupation is. That's sometimes months into the relate. They're more interested in who you are. And what's interesting is I started introducing myself as a creator, and that spurs up a lot more interesting questions as opposed to, oh, I'm a XYZ or I'm a doctor or this and that. So it's just who you are and the skills, and people are more civil and they want to see what you can genuinely offer as opposed to kind of manipulate and kind of like you said, ego and status and all of these things that we associate with status in the West. So next question is I have is what is chapter X, and how do you help coaching the men in the audience in transition? How should they begin to think about post-career transitions? And how can they start preparing for plan B?
Yeah. Uh, as I said, Chapter X was the community I created. That's of no cost to anybody. I do a monthly Zoom meeting where guys come on, and I have three rules. Number one is we don't talk politics, we don't talk sports, and I don't care what you're drinking, what's in your glass. So we talk about real things like legacy. At our last meeting, we talked about happiness. How does the idea of happiness change from the time that you're, say, 30 or 35 to how you are today at 65 or 60 or 70? What do you look at? And the idea of came out about contentment. It's not looking for happiness, it's looking for contentment and satisfaction in how one lives their life. The expectation. So I'll give you. I'll kind of veer off a little bit to the side, but the idea when we're working in our work career, and we know that we're working from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, or 9 to 5, or whatever that cycle is, and we have a structure. And if you're in corporate America, you know that's story. Who do you report to? And what's your responsibilities? And all these things are very well laid out. The next day, all that's wiped away. And you're left there going, what am I supposed to do? Who am I? You're kind of untethered. So the idea is how do you approach this from the standpoint of, I call it aggressive inquisitiveness. Like, what can I try? Like a great example, when I've talked to people and they say, what are you going to do when you retire? I'm going to play golf. And I'm going to play golf 365 days a year, like for the next 30 years. That's it. I
Yeah.
said, okay, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But what happens if you have a bad hip, or your knee goes out, or it's raining? What are you going to do? Sit on the couch and watch Oprah? There's got to be more to it than that. So the idea is really kind of dig into possibilities. what might be interesting, what might be fun. You know, as I said earlier, I started playing music again and taking lessons and things like that. I started playing with a local community band, and after the first rehearsal, I said, I don't like the people. I don't like the music they're playing. Maybe it's me. I'm not an extrovert. I'll try it again. And I went to the second rehearsal, felt the same way, told the conductor, sorry, I'm out. It wasn't fun. Meanwhile, I play with an adult big band and I'm having the time of my life. And so it's like, okay, I made the decision. Just because I said yes to it today doesn't mean I'm consigned for life. So the idea is to approach these things with curiosity, with fun. Is this enjoyable? Does it make me feel good? Is it purposeful? When people say, I'm going to volunteer, great, but volunteer things that are meaningful to you and try it. You might try something and say, I don't like it. I had a dear friend of mine came to me. She says, I really don't know what to do in retirement. I'm saying, well, try something. And if you like it, do it again. And if you like it, do it again. If you don't like it, don't do it again. So we have this whole buffet of possibilities in front of us that we can try and sample. But we have to eliminate the ego side of it. Like, I've got to be great at this. Like, no, you don't. You just have to have fun with it and realize that the title that you carried for all those years is an impediment to your happiness now because you're putting everything against that blueprint of success. And success in this chapter is based on our willingness to go out and do that work.
I love that. And, a lot of the things is, because it was interesting because I was talking to another podcast guest and they were saying that, this concept of arrival, this arrival fallacy, like, I will be happy when XYZ or this and that, or, but she reframed it as a process. So it's kind of like, when you emphasize spontaneity, joy, creativity, like music or writing or speaking, things that, you don't do for the money, but just kind of things that, make you happy and joyous. So really interesting. And I'm sure a lot of the audience, especially the male physicians and listening to this, they may need help with career transitions, and you seem in a good position to do that. How can they contact you, follow you, check out your social medias, and so on?
Where they can find out more about what I'm doing is at michaelfk.com. And there's a link to emails and sign up for the blogs and get invitations to the Zoom meetings. And that's the best way to find me. And the idea is if you have questions, ask the questions. I'm happy to jump on a call or a Zoom with anybody just to chat. There's no cost. There's no obligations. I'm not trying to sell anything. And to me, helping people, this is an extension of my career of helping people in whatever way I can because it's challenging. It's hard. But the mindset needs to be realigned to saying being the president, being the best doctor, being the best attorney is no longer the part of the calculus for how you live your life. I had a guest on a couple of years ago, and he said, there's a day you are born and a day you die. He goes, it's in the dash where you live, and that's what's important is the dash. What happened in each day to make our lives more fulfilling and more meaningful.
Yeah, I love that. And what a great way to end it. You can't take your status or your wealth with you. So it's like what you do with it, and it's how you live your life. And really fantastic conversation. And for all the audience, be sure to give Michael's socials a like and follow and reach out to him. And thanks so much for coming on.
It was my joy.